Hi, everyone. I am Tiffany Eddy, and I am so pleased to be joined with my new co-host, Tom Praisall from Demers and Praisall. And we are very excited to welcome you to our very first video podcast called Anything But Politics. And this is a new podcast where we're talking to political figures and esteemed leaders about all sorts of different things in their life that has to do with basically anything but politics.
Yeah, and thanks, Tiffany. And we're here today with our very first show with our very first guest, who is somebody who's really made of granite, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this gentleman has had more titles than the city of Boston in the early 2000s. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce our esteemed guest today, who is a former member of the Wolfboro Planning Board, Jeb Bradley.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
And not only, obviously, is he a former member of the Wolfboro Planning Board, but he's also was a member of the Budget Committee and, a former congressman and former Senate president and former Senate Majority Leader.
I thought we weren't talking politics,
but,
brother.
he certainly has been here, been around the state for a while and has ingrained himself within the state. So, as Tiffany mentioned, we're here to learn more about folks. And so, Jeb, I feel like we should start really at the beginning. And so one thing I think folks might not know is you were actually born in Maine, correct?
I was.
In Rumford, Maine?
Rumford, Maine.
Which is a mill. Is that a mill town or a mill city?
It was at the time.
Okay.
My father went to Bowdoin, and my father and mother were both from Connecticut, same town. And he decided after he graduated from Bowdoin, he took a job at, I think it was Brown Paper Company in Rumford. My mother hated it. The smell of sulfur drove her nuts. Yeah. And that didn't last long, but long enough that I was born. And they went back to Connecticut for a year, and my dad worked in a hardware store for a while, loved it, and went to Wolfboro and bought a hardware store in the early 1950s. And I've lived in Wolfboro ever since.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What was the name of the hardware store?
I think it was Brock's or Brocky's.
Brocky Hardware.
But that was a long time ago.
Well, what made him choose Wolfboro? Coming from Connecticut, had they vacationed there?
My grandfather had a friend that had a cabin back in those days, homes on islands in Lake Winnipesaukee, really were cabins. And when my folks were dating, Natty Goodhue of Goodhue and Hawkins, which is one of the biggest marinas on Lake Winnipesaukee, would take them out there to Kenaston Island. And so they had some familiarity with Wolfboro. And then when the hardware store became available several years later, that's why, I guess. I can't ask them now. They're both gone to
But what a great place
greater
to grow
pastures.
up, too.
Yeah, Wolfboro's a really nice town. Really nice town.
And you've been there for many years
With the
now.
exception of a couple of years that I lived in Switzerland, I've lived in Wolfboro all my life.
Wow. So Switzerland, now I definitely want to get to Wolfboro, but since you brought up Switzerland, what brought you there and how did you find it?
So I was hiking in the Himalayas in Nepal, and I met my former wife, and she was from Switzerland, and one thing led to another, and found ourselves in Switzerland.
How long were you there for?
3 years. Yeah, 3 years. It was great.
Yeah. Anything interesting? What'd you do while you were there?
I knew you were going to ask that question.
It's a good question.
Is that leading the witness?
You haven't read my Wikipedia page.
Only a couple dozen times.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I know it verbatim.
somebody spent years trying to get that removed, the citation of what I did. I was a street performer. I was a magician, and had quite a bag of tricks, and I couldn't get legal work papers, so that's what I did.
All right. Well, I want to know about these tricks. So was it
Yeah.
card tricks? Was it
Nope,
sleight of hand?
Didn't do any card tricks. Some sleight of hand, rope tricks. I had a really good trick with a dollar bill.
What's the best trick in your bag of tricks?
Most popular.
The most popular was always the one where I would ask somebody to give me a piece of clothing that they were wearing, and I would proceed to put a cigarette out on the clothing, and then return the clothing to the person. And generally speaking, there were no burns or things like that.
Generally speaking.
As long as I did it correctly. And then I'd pull the cigarette out of their ear.
Oh, get out.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Still
a good
lit?
trick. What's that?
Was it still lit when you pulled it out? Or
Hopefully it didn't go out on them, but you know.
No, I did pretty well most of the time. Yeah, most of the time. I'm not going to tell you how, of course.
So nothing that you could perform here.
Nothing I could perform here.
That's-
Sorry.
But you were earning a living. Was it enough to like earn a living?
Yeah, well, I wasn't living very luxuriously by any means.
But you were
So,
eating.
Yeah, we managed. It was okay. So it was good. I had a lot of fun. I went in Luzern and Zurich and occasionally in Bern. Those were the 3 towns that I performed in, but mostly Luzern because we were maybe 10 minutes outside of the town. And if you've ever been there, there's a beautiful lake, Lake Luzern, and a river that comes right off the lake, and there are a couple of old, like 14th century wooden bridges with beautiful paintings and that go across the river, the Ara River. And there was one sort of square, if you could call it that, with some long stone steps that come down to it. And that was generally where I would perform. But further up the river, right by one of the bridges, was another big place that I would sometimes do it. But at the other place, by the other bridge, I could have better crowd participation. Just, I don't know why, but it just seemed to work that way.
So I'm so curious because I've known you, generally speaking, for many, many years when I first interviewed you when I was at Channel 9 and you were running for Congress. And I've never knew about you being a street performer or a magician ever until Tom told me about it recently. So now I'm so curious, like, what gave you the confidence and the skill to be able to go do that? Like, when were you at some point in your life like, okay, I'm in Switzerland, I'm going to be a magician? Like, how did you develop those skills?
It's like anything else. You just do it, and if it comes naturally to you, it's okay, and you get a little positive feedback, and then you do it. And I didn't have much choice. I needed to eat. I mean, it's the same thing. How do you, interview people on Channel 9 where you have to, worry about the way you look, what you say, how you interact with people? You just do it. And it's like a lot of things in life. How do you talk to, all the people that you have to talk to? You just do it.
you got to jump in feet first, right?
Yeah. Feet first.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Sometimes head first.
Yeah. So 3 years in Switzerland, and then you moved back to Wolfboro.
I did.
And now was your family was still there?
Yep. My mother was there. My father had moved to Colorado. My parents got divorced. And I bought a natural food store. And Barbara and I had 4 kids. And we were pretty sedentary for a while with 4 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
keeps you busy.
Then I first ran for, local office in the mid-1980s, and then the rest is history. But we're not supposed to talk about that.
Well, we can talk about
Oh,
that.
you
We
can
just
mix
don't
it
want to
in a
talk.
little
We
bit.
can skirt around
Yeah,
the edges.
yeah, okay, all right.
There are rules, so we get to make them.
Yeah.
But so what prompted, what was that moment when you're like, you know what, I want to give back to my community, I want to serve. What was it that prompted you to want to
So I think
get
I had always, going back to high school when I was a senior in high school, and the first Earth Day happened, and that was kind of big. And
It's my birthday, just so you know.
is it April 22nd?
April 22nd every
There
year.
you go. There you go. And the environment's always been pretty special to me. I love to hike and do all sorts of crazy things. So Earth Day was pretty significant. And I thought then that, see what happens, but I didn't have any real plan. And just when opportunities presented themselves, it's pretty easy to run for elected office in New Hampshire. $5 will get you on the ballot. But I always tell people, be prepared for what you ask for. you might get it. So when you sign up for something, you might get elected. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing. And you've been doing it for quite a while.
So when you first started, was the planning board your first foray into, local government?
Yep. And I'll tell you this. Being a planning board member is probably one of the harder jobs for an elected official because you're in everybody's backyard.
That's right. So
The only job that might be harder, and I think local officials have the hardest job because they're so close to people in New Hampshire. Everybody knows who you are and all that. The only tougher job is being a school board member or a select board member because then you're at everybody's kitchen table
That's right.
when you're talking about their kids or, whatever. So
It's an interesting point, though, and one that I want to explore a little bit. But do you think, in your opinion, New Hampshire is unique because of how we're set up, how anybody can get involved, and that the fact that also, I think in so many communities, there's 6 degrees of separation. I feel like in New Hampshire, there's like maybe 1 or 2 degrees of separation.
or zero sometimes.
Right. You can pretty much pick up the phone and call anybody and get in touch with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point about New Hampshire. With 400 people in the House, it's almost a given that if you are in the state legislature, people are going to know you and they're going to know how to get in touch with you. And you represent about 3,500 people, and that's not a lot compared to, other elected offices. So, you're as I always used to say, you pull your trousers on the same way as anybody else, one leg at a time.
Yeah, that's what we all do. And do you think like we have a unique ability here to make a difference in New Hampshire? Like anybody can decide, kind of like you did, I'm going to get up today and I'm going to run for planning board or I'm going to run for school board and I'm going to make a difference in my community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what makes New Hampshire great. It's interesting that as New Hampshire is rated for charitable giving, we're one of the more parsimonious states for charitable giving. But in terms of volunteering and serving on whether it's elected positions or not-for-profit boards or things like that, people in New Hampshire do more volunteering than just about any other state. So it's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, New Hampshire people I've always found have been very generous.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with their time. I mean, we're not supposed to talk about the legislature, but we all know that everyone gets paid $100 a year and spend most of their Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from January to June up at the State House. So that's quite a volunteer right there. But I want to go back real quick to the planning board because I served on my town planning board in Hooksett for a number of years. And I was curious because, as you said, you're in everyone's backyard. What was the most controversial plan that came before you while you were on the board?
Oh, there were a lot of them. And I was on the planning board in the mid-'80s, and there was a real estate boom. And I made the mistake of saying, we should have a moratorium on any new building. And, the planning board voted for it from one day to the other without a public hearing. It was outrageous, terrible. So the next meeting we had to rescind it, and there were like 100 contractors in the rooms throwing things virtually at us, and they were all right. We were wrong. So we rescinded it. And, then really tried to think about how you manage growth as opposed to just saying no.
Yeah. And I mean, Wolfboro is such a quintessential New Hampshire and New England town, right? I mean, and the number of folks who flock to Wolfboro. I mean, Mitt Romney, does he still own a home there? Yep. And didn't the president of France used to come visit?
He vacationed there.
Yeah.
Actually, it may have been in Alton.
Okay.
But there's still a autographed picture of him hanging on one of the it's a local meat market, and he shopped there, and so he, was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, New Hampshire is so special with all we have to offer, including what we have, the natural beauty. And I know you, speaking of natural beauty, let's get into.
Are you going to get into his looks right now?
Well, absolutely. I mean,
Not me, pal.
Let's start right there.
Let's be honest. You're not wearing any makeup and you look that good.
That's right.
That's really like
And you should see him with the
with the
winter
makeup
hat
on.
on.
Yeah, it's like
and the
magical.
And the winter hat when he does all of his hiking. So let's get right into one of your biggest passions in life, right? Hiking. Now you have traversed all 48 4,000 footers every month.
Every month.
So and that's the grid. Can you
That's the
first
grid.
explain to me what the grid is? Because I heard about this for the first time.
Okay.
Just what the grid, how does that work?
So there are 48 mountains in New Hampshire that are 4,000 feet high or higher. Mount Washington is 6,288, and Tecumseh is 4,003. Although some people think it's less than that, and it may disqualify as a 4,000 footer. So the grid is climbing all of them in every month. So all 48 in January, February, et cetera. So I love winter hiking. It's my favorite hiking.
That's a lot of hiking.
It's a lot of hiking. It's 576 peaks, 48 times 12.
That's how he stays so
Now, it's
fit.
not it's not 576 different trips. You probably can do it in 400. Or if you're a really good, strong hiker, you could combine, other hikes. And, some people could probably do 6 peaks in a day. But
Wow.
that's a lot.
That's-
I never did that.
I mean, the whole grid sounds like a lot.
Takes a while, although there are a couple of people who've done it all in a year, amazingly. So they've probably been able to get it down to 150 days of hiking. That's pretty remarkable.
Have you, and you climb Mount Washington in the winter, like you are an avid hiker, so I would imagine that you've seen some incredible beauty, but have you ever gotten into a situation where you've been a little apprehensive, like, oh my gosh, that was like a really close call?
Never for me, thankfully. Did get a bit of frostbite once, but I've gotten frostbite skiing, so, I was with Karen, she recognized it, and I just pulled it was on my cheek, so I pulled the buff up, and, it just caught it right away. Never got lost. There was one time I was with a very experienced hiker, and we were on the backside of Cabot, which is the northernmost of the 48, and we were going to hit 2 other lesser peaks, and it was Valentine's Day, and we were having a hard time finding the trail, and this was before GPS, so he was using a map and compass, and I was going, oh my God.
Yeah, how'd we
But he
survive
was-
in those days? Like, seriously?
He had done it before, so he recognized some of the landmarks, but we were also looking for the, the paint on the trees, the trail markers. And so at one point, we hadn't seen one in quite a while, and we could have backtracked because we were on snowshoes, so we had a track, and we could have gone back up over the summit and back down the way we came in. But so I never felt like we were lost, and it would have been quite dark if we had had to do that. And so we split up in a direction like this, and we probably had maybe, 100, 150 yards between us until I found one of the marks on the tree, the blaze, and then we sort of were back on track. But nobody had hiked that trail for some time, so there was no snowshoe track. There was no indentation, nothing. And the woods were, there was no place or many places that did not look like a trail. Oftentimes, you're on a trail just because it's cut 6 feet, 8 feet wide. But most of the time, on most of the trails, even if there's, a foot of snow, there will be a track, an indentation from the people who've gone before. So it happens. But now with GPS, it's much easier. You just pull out your GPS or your phone, and you can realize, oh, I'm 100 feet off the trail or whatever.
So that's one of my questions, because so for me, the idea of hiking is, grabbing my cooler and beach chair and hiking from the car to the beach. So if I were to start hiking, what would be the one piece of advice you would give me other than comfortable shoes, maybe?
Maybe downsize the cooler a tiny bit.
Well, first of all, I guess I would recommend that you go with a group. And like the AMC has group hikes that they do out of the Highland Center in Upper Bartlett. So that'd be one thing. I would definitely utilize the Fish and Game website and make sure I had the 10 essential gears.
Okay.
Items.
Which are?
Well, the proper clothing, food, map, compass, ability to start a fire, those things, water. Probably the most important thing, other than the proper shoes and clothing, is a headlamp, because you just never know. I've actually run into people and ran into a lady on Owl's Head, and this was in June, and gave her my lamp, because I always carry two, because I learned the hard way when you go with people that you don't know and they don't have a headlamp. And so then one day, right around this time of year, it was in December, and we were doing Passat Conway, and there were 5 of us, and one guy had a headlamp and I had a headlamp. And so he went in the beginning, I went in the end, and it was like, thankfully in the snow it's not too bad, but you kind of need a headlamp if you're out at night. So at any rate, I gave this headlamp to a woman. I said, just send it back to Jeb Bradley, care of the State House. Now, it turned out that they listened to me and didn't go to the summit and just took off and went back to the car. But back to the car on Owl's Head is like 8 miles.
Wow.
So, and it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was June. So, it was about 3 hours. But if they had gone to the summit and back, they would have been 10 o'clock and 2 hours in the, dark.
That's crazy.
No light.
And that leads me to another question. Like there's, and I don't think we're getting into politics necessarily, but there's been press about the fact that, and I think especially post-COVID, that more and more people are enjoying New Hampshire's natural resources. So my question, I guess, would be, is as an avid hiker, have you noticed the trails being more congested now, and are we doing enough to kind of manage that, I guess?
The trails could use more maintenance. No question about that. When the trails were cut in the White Mountains, people just went up. And there are not enough switchbacks. So because the trails are steep, they erode more readily, unlike out west where because of the altitude, there has to be more switchbacks just to make it easier. And the soil is different, the terrain is different. So it's just a huge amount of erosion. So there are mitigating things that, good trail smiths can do, but there's just not enough people that maintain trails. So they're getting, a bit eroded. And what happens then is the main trail might be a mess. And so people then go off in the woods and, or if a tree falls across the trail, then people go off in the woods. So suddenly you have, ribbons of more erosion. So it is kind of an issue. But, overall, I think it's really good that a lot of people want to enjoy, being outdoors, and they get cooped up in their day-to-day lives. And so it's worth it.
It's like medicine for the soul, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, you brought up something there that is making me think, which is very dangerous. But, you brought up that about hiking on the West Coast, right? And then earlier you spoke about when you were hiking in Nepal. So I'm guessing you've hiked everywhere.
Not
right?
everywhere,
Well,
but I've hiked in a few places that are pretty cool.
Yeah. So what's the coolest hike ever? And you don't have to say New Hampshire, because I think as of tomorrow at midnight, you're no longer the Senate president. But, Kilimanjaro, have you ever done anything crazy
been,
like that?
Quite that high. I always say my favorite hike is the next one.
Okay.
So whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there are, I think if I could only do one hike that I've done before, it would be Mount St. Helens.
Okay.
That was just really cool. I was with my brother, and we camped at the base of the mountain, and it's like 9,500 feet, I think.
Wow.
And it used to be 11,000 until the top of the mountain was blown off in the volcano. And we got up real early, and the trees there, the big spruce trees, I mean, they're humongous and they're tall. And so we started at, 4 in the morning because he's a photographer, and he wanted to get up on the mountain and take sunrise pictures as we were above tree line. So that's why we started so early. And, you're walking up, and suddenly you leave the trees and you come into sort of lava fields, and you got to put gloves on because it's so sharp, even though it was warm. You just, because you're having to balance, and it's the soil moves, so you need to stabilize. And then we got through that section, and then there was just a long, gradual, but fairly steep climb, the last maybe 1,000 vertical feet to the summit. And, you're looking around, and you can't really see anything that looks much like a summit. And the next thing you know, from one step to the next, you just crest over where you can see over the edge, and there's Mount Rainier. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And it's like huge. It's a huge mountain. And if you walk 15 more steps, you'll fall into the caldera.
Oh, no way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you can sort of walk around a little bit in maybe, I don't know, 500 or 600 feet of the caldera around where there's snow or stable. But you don't want to get too close because people have fallen in.
Oh,
Yeah.
So my
wow.
brother had been there, so he knew all this stuff. So I didn't experiment.
That's lucky.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to go with like Tom
Yeah. No, not with me.
and the cooler.
Yeah. The cooler would be fun,
The
though.
cooler would be fun. You just have to get it up there.
Yeah. And so I know you've been to Hawaii a number of times, right? How was the hiking different there? I mean, you just mentioned, obviously.
So there are some amazing hikes in Hawaii. Very different. It's tropical. But when you get up high enough, you're above, the tree line, so you're in volcanic territory too, and it's really beautiful. So most of the hiking I've done in Hawaii is on the island of Kauai. And there's some really small hikes, but there's all over the island, but they're on the sort of the northwest side of the island. There's a long hike along the ocean. And I've only done part of it because I did not have the ability to spend the night. It's 11 miles in and 11 miles back. So I did maybe half of it, came back. And then you can drive around to the other side of the island and walk up to the top of what's called Waimea Canyon. And so it's called the Grand Canyon of the Pacific. And I'd say it's probably 3,000 feet down to the base of the canyon. So canyon hiking is very different. You start at the top, obviously, and you walk down. It's not like climbing Mount Washington where you walk up and the hard part is behind you. So canyon hiking, you got to have enough energy to get back up.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty cool. But I love hiking in Hawaii. So
That sounds amazing. I did Mount Washington. I've hiked Mount Washington twice in my hiking career, both times with my daughter. But I always found coming down to be harder than going
it
up
actually is harder.
because your thighs
quads,
their
yeah.
quads are just kind of shot.
And you're probably pretty stiff the next day.
Oh my goodness! Don't even get me started. Yeah.
So that's why switchbacks are so much easier because, you're going like this, so you're not going down or up as much. But, usually, like in Colorado, I've climbed a couple of the 14ers, and
That's impressive.
the climb is easier, but the altitude's pretty. You got to be able to deal with the altitude. So
Yeah,
I remember
that is
one
hard.
time I was golfing at Copper Mountain in Colorado, and this was back when I was in like peak fitness shape. And
Like
I
last
was,
week.
yes, several years ago. And I was behind everybody else, and they were up at the tee box. And so I just jogged maybe 15 yards up to them, and I was winded. And I'm like, what is going on? I'm so winded. And I saw a sign, the highest elevated tee box in North America. And I was like, oh, this is great. My ball is going to go further. But unfortunately, it went about
you missed.
It went about 50 yards and took a hard right into the woods. So, but you're absolutely right as far as the altitude and being. It doesn't matter how good a shape you are here, because it's completely different up there. So how do you train for that?
You just have to go hike. So if you, like when you go to Colorado, my kids live in steamboats, so that's at about 6,500, 7,000 feet. And if you're there for a couple of days, you start to get used to it. You go up to 8,000 or 9,000 feet, and after a couple more days, you can go higher. But you go slow. You don't try to do too much.
And I'm curious too, because I understand you used to a while ago own a health food store. How much emphasis do you put in what we put in our bodies? Like, what did you learn from that experience? Like, that's another thing about you I had no idea. So, do you have any advice and guidance for people who want to become more physically active? Is there actually something to supplements, nutrients, organic? What's your opinion?
So I think eating a good, healthy diet of, broad range of foods, but focused on fruit and vegetables as the primary. Not that I do it, but that's what you should do.
Tommy wants special supplements.
Yeah, any special supplements that are out there that
No, I've taken some of these juice pills in the past, but I don't know. They don't seem to do too much. So, but I eat pretty well for the most part. I like my chocolate chip cookies a little bit too much, though.
I should have brought you in some. That would have been fun. Just made a bunch of chocolate chip cookies, but
Yeah. But, so you mentioned your kids do all of them live in Colorado?
My daughter lives in Washington State, outside of Seattle. She's in a really nice spot, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've got a place in Florida,
Yep.
and you've got Wolfboro, and you've got some unfinished business on Kauai to finish
Well, I don't
that
know
hike.
about unfinished business.
To finish the hike, right?
So I will tell you, one of the coolest hikes I've ever done is the Alakai Swamp hike. And you start at the top of the canyon at the end of the road, and you have to drive on a dirt road for a couple of miles past and you park, and you're at a semi-tropical jungle at 4,000 feet in altitude. And you walk and you walk and you walk. And I tried to do this walk 3 times before Karen and I did it successfully. So we were there in November, so it's a little cooler even in Hawaii in November. And at 4,000 feet, it was probably 50 degrees. And the further in we got, the more foggy it became. And it was pretty easy to follow the trail. And then we get to the swamp, and there were like boardwalks, and, they were kind of, I don't know, they hadn't been maintained all that well. And we didn't fall in, and you wouldn't have gone too far, probably, hopefully. And we got to the end, and we couldn't see a thing. We couldn't see more than 10 feet, and we were on the verge of being hypothermic.
Oh, jeez.
wow.
We didn't carry a lot of clothes. We did have a change of clothes, and neither one of us had put on a windbreaker, so we were just sopped from, a little bit of sweat and a lot of fog and 50, 55-degree weather. So we weren't really in any danger, but it was great to put on a windbreaker, and then that was waterproof, so the way back was a lot easier. And we knew, okay, this is going to take us an hour and a half or whatever, 2 hours to get back to the car. It wasn't like, How much further is the end? Because we can't see a thing.
But I think that, and so this is, I want to switch gears a little bit because I think that speaks to you as a person because you didn't give up. And you've been on a lot of hikes where you didn't give up. And, shifting a tiny bit to politics, you were in Congress and then lost, and you didn't give up. And I always thought that was really fascinating, just you as a person, and spoke so much as to who you were, is that then you got involved and became a state senator. And, arguably, not because you're right here in front of us, but one of the most, highly esteemed, Senate presidents that there has been. So I guess my question for you is how is it that you have continued to go forward and still found a way or have found a way to provide this incredible value and service to your community and state? Because your guy doesn't give up.
Well, that's funny that you would say it because I am retiring and my term ends tomorrow night. But
that's your decision. Cause
yeah, that was my decision. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always wanted to leave on my own terms, and I was able to do that. As Tom knows, I lost twice when I was in Congress. So that, but you learn more from your losses than you do your wins, but you're lucky if you can learn from your wins too, how to be better. And I've been fortunate; just things have seemed to have come pretty naturally, and I felt that being a member of the New Hampshire Senate was really, it was a tremendous honor, but because there are only 24 of us, you have to figure out how to get along with people, and you can't let differences of opinion get in the way all the time. Some of the time they happen, but not all the time. And I think the New Hampshire Senate is kind of unique in terms of, certainly anything else that I've been a member of, which is two of the largest English-speaking legislative bodies in the world, the New Hampshire House and U.S. Congress, the British Parliament's the other one. So 24 people, you got to figure out how to make it work. It's not always easy, but,
Yeah, but
when you only get paid $100 a year, there is a little bit more mutual respect of people that you are on opposite political fences on. So,
And you probably bought a new Porsche with that money.
no. I have a nice Jeep, though.
yeah. So two very different experiences, right? Congress and the New Hampshire House. Would you indulge us in two of your favorite stories from each that may have happened?
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Well, I thought it was when I was a member of the Congress, it was pretty cool when the shipyard was taken off the closure list.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. That was in 2005. And I think, just Medicaid expansion has been very successful, and I had a little bit to do with that here. So those are probably the two.
So I remember when I interned for you in Congress, we did a road race. And the only job I was given as the intern was make sure you beat John Sununu.
And I didn't.
Well, I trailed him. I was, behind him. And that guy is so fast. He took off at the halfway point. And he blew me out of the water. And
But I beat Mike Licata and everybody else on our team.
And Mike
sure did.
Licata is a fast guy, so he's a skinny...
When I blew by him, he couldn't believe it. But I was training to run a marathon at that point, and I ran a half marathon, 2 or 3 weeks after that road race that you talked about. And I remember crossing the finish line and saying to myself, "You got another 13 miles in you?" And the answer was no.
Yeah.
And I gave up running 2 or 3 months later and started hiking.
you used to swim a lot too, right? You
Little
live
bit.
on a lake, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a rock out, 100 yards or so from our beach, and I swim out there, but I don't consider myself a swimmer.
Got an odd question for you. We've talked about you, but I'm just wondering, like, Tom was an intern. What was he like when he was younger? Was he
He's
a good
no
intern?
different than
Really?
he is today.
We'll just turn the corners
Really
and put it on.
good guy, and we found talent, and of course I'm going to embarrass him now.
Oh, please
I
do.
knew this was bound to happen.
Yeah, well, Tiffany asked the question. Don't tell me it wasn't set up, but that was good.
We're unrehearsed here.
Yeah.
So in the parades that we used to do, Tom was Captain America, so I always called him Captain, and he made a shield, Captain America shield and a sword out of duct tape and cardboard, and he would carry them in the parade. So we always called him Captain.
And let me tell you something. As a 21-year-old walking in a Saturday morning parade in 90-degree heat, I think that suit has been burned. No one wants to wear that or smell that.
Right, but you kept the shield.
I do have the shield.
We'll have
We'll
to bring
always
that
have
out
the
at some
shield.
point. So, best piece of advice that was ever given to you?
My mother always told me, if you're not moving ahead, you're falling behind. So I'd say that was pretty good advice.
And for those that might want to come up behind you, what advice would you say to somebody who's thinking, Senator Bradley's now not in the Senate anymore. He's not our Senate president. Maybe I should get involved.
So I always tell people several things. First of all, they got to like you to vote for you. So if you're a jerk, it makes it a lot harder to get elected. I already used one of them. Be prepared for what you ask for. You might get it. So I always, when people ask me, I say, well, you better be prepared to win because you're going to have to do the job. People expect you to do the job. You can't, blow it off or take it, anything other than very seriously. And then I guess the other big thing I always try to tell people is that honey catches more flies than vinegar, which is sort of a codicil for they got to like you to vote for you.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's nice. I remember Tom Bergeron used to always tell me when I interviewed Tom Bergeron, who I have incredible respect for and such a good human, both in front of the camera and off. But he would always just talk about seeing other celebrities and they maybe weren't so nice behind the camera. And same kind of thing. Like it's much easier to be a nice guy than it is. Won't use the word he used, but to be unpleasant, and it can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. So
Very
I guess, as you mentioned, tomorrow at midnight, you're no longer Senate President Bradley. What's next? 'Cause
Karen and I are going to Florida on Thursday, and who knows? Take it one day at a time at this point. I want to do a book about some of my hiking with some of my pictures. We'll see.
But we'll see you in New Hampshire, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not leaving.
Okay.
Yeah, just temporarily.
Just warm weather.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right.
I like the cold though.
Because we like having you.
Karen likes the warmth, and we have
I'm with
a
Karen.
condo in a really nice spot, and we love walking on the beach.
With Napoleon.
He's not allowed on that beach. It's too hot anyway for him.
Napoleon's the dog.
Yeah.
Well, Senator Bradley,
Pleasure.
thank you so much. I've known you for so many years and really feel like I got to know you quite a bit more today during this session. So thank you for being our very first guest on anything but politics. I think we adhered to the rules. We really didn't get into politics.
I think that's fair. And just, one final question I have for you. So you've been congressman, planning board member, senator, representative, majority leader, President Bradley. What do you want to be? What should people say to you when they see you on the street moving forward?
Don't call me any of the titles, just Jeb.
Will do.
But don't call me a Yankee fan.
Never.
Never.
No, we didn't even get to that. Avid Red Sox fan.
Yeah. But, well, again, thank you very much. Consummate gentleman, consummate Granite Stater. The state has been lucky to have you.
I've been lucky to be a part of it.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And, we want to thank the audience. This was
Absolutely.
our first episode of Anything But Politics, and Tom and I will be back with more episodes. We have some other political leaders coming up, and want to thank you for your time and your support.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And we'll see you soon. Take care.